Happy Hoarder here, and I want to thank Favi of Arrows of DIY for hosting the Christ is Risen collaboration. Be sure you check out the link to her channel in the description below and check out that playlist of all the other participants. I'm going to be creating some faux stained glass wooden ornaments. Now these little ornaments came from a goodie bag from a thrift store, my favorite one, Rolling Hills Ministries, and some paper napkins that have the cute little Easter eggs on them. I'm going to be using Mod Podge, a little paint, but you're going to learn more about that paint later. I thought this would be a really cute idea to use as a sort of a stained glass effect. First of all, I am going to be doing a little bit of sanding on them. And this is my secret weapon here. This is a box of transparencies I also thrifted at Rolling Hills Ministries thrift store. And I'm going to use them as kind of a backer for my napkins so that they will remain clear and I can have a nice protective coating on the back. I also thought there may be some other ways that I could do this, but I like this idea. I think it's going to work. I've never done this before, so you're going to get to experiment with me. You could also use something like the top of a container. In this case, I have some eggs. Pete and Jerry's not a sponsor, but you might want to use something like plastic that came from a bakery or something like that. So first thing I'm going to do is coat my plastic with some Mod Podge, and I am using the gloss. And this is something I've had for a while. And what I am pleased about is that it didn't cause it to wrinkle or warp. So that was a really good thing, because that's one of the things when you're experimenting with new materials, you don't know what's going to happen. So I am a Plaid Ambassador, and they sent me that lovely little brayer so I could smush out my bubbles. And right now I am doing the sanding. That was some tedious work. I always recommend sanding these pieces. It's not a good quality wood, and it does tend to leave fuzzies and all sorts of little issues. And I continue to have some issues with my little fuzzies. So we'll talk about that later. And I did do all the layout here. Make a note of this as well, because later I totally forgot to lay out my crosses, and you'll see what happens. But a smart person would remember to lay out the crosses before cutting them out. It was just one of those days. Speaking of Favi, I worked on my project while I was watching her live replay of the Mystery Box Challenge, and that was a lot of fun. And I also watched the other videos on the playlist. Thank you, ladies, for keeping me thoroughly entertained watching you with your challenges while I was facing a few challenges of my own with this project. I really tried to make this a short project, but it just kept getting longer and longer. So what I thought would take me about an hour to do ended up taking me well over 2 hours to do. But I had 2 hours of video that I had to crop down and fast forward just so we could get through it. What I did not like about the paint is that I had to paint inside all of those little areas, and that made me think, there's got to be a better idea for this, because this was turning into a very long project. Now I'm just trying to get some of my drips off the back. Ideally, you don't want to paint the back, but I had kind of dripped around, and so I was trying to clean it up. I'm painting really fast, and I think that's part of the problem. I didn't take my time. I would recommend that you sand better. I also always recommend you use sealer. I cannot find my sealer, but the last time I saw it, I was about halfway empty anyway. I probably need to go get some more. I do recommend sealer on all of these wood products because it makes a big difference. I think it gives you a smoother finish to work on, and it also helps prevent that first layer from really soaking in, and then you know what it means with the paint. You just have to use more layers of paint. So I did decide to go and spray paint instead. Now, spray painting in the dark when it's cold outside, and my paint was kind of cold because, it was winter, even though I have a short sleeves on, I'm actually got my heater on. So yeah, that turned out to be a hot mess. I just want to tell you right now that I had some issues, and the only paint that I had handy did have a gloss finish. I wasn't a big fan of the gloss finish, so I'm coming back over and trying to dull it back down with some paint. Now in the end, I used a sealer that had gloss, so they ended up glossy again. I don't even. So that kind of saying, this is a process. This is not something I read the directions to. This is something I just sat down and kind of came up with as I went along. So I'm gluing all of the little areas because I want it to stick really well, and pushing it down. And I didn't realize at the time there's about a 1-inch gap between the napkin and the plastic, and I completely missed it because I forgot. And so I had to go back and do a little patchwork on that. Yeah, that was the other thing. I just lay out your stuff first. Trim off the excess and lay it out. Please do as I say, not as I did on this challenge. Anyway, I cannot find any more of these crosses. I looked online to see where they came from. I couldn't find them, but I did see something similar to this at Hobby Lobby. I think you cut something like this out of mat board or chipboard or something like that and make one yourself. I do want to point out here that when I cut it out, I am cutting it at like a 45-degree tilt, so that I'm kind of undercutting the wood part, and that way it hides that background, so you don't see the color around the edge. So now I have this nice clear background that protects the back of the tissue, but I still need to do something with the front. And I real quick showed a shot of a sealer that I used before I did any kind of Mod Podge. So while that is drying, I am working on number 2. I'm doing the same thing with the glue, and so you're going to see me kind of repeating what I do for the other 2. And yes, this is the point where I realized I glued it down on the wrong section, so that I had not laid it out properly. One thing that I did is using the hair dryer, I caused my paint to bubble, but it created a very interesting texture. Now, had I meant to do this, I never would have pulled it off, but I really did kind of like how it had that rough texture on this particular one. The other 2 didn't do it, just this one. One thing about trying to do a quick project is the thing that's not quick, and that's allowing things to dry. And I was really rushing through this, which is why I kept using the hair dryer. So right now I'm just testing this area, which I thought, why didn't I do this before on another sheet? But I did want to show you. I know this is going to work, so I wasn't worried about it. But I'm applying 2 to 3 coats of Mod Podge on each little thing to give it this really thick, glassy look. Because if you look at stained glass, it's thick and it's kind of has some texture to it. So I definitely wanted to put a lot of Mod Podge in each of these little sections. Now, being the messy painter that I am, that's why I ended up coating the whole thing with Mod Podge in the end. And it does have that glossy effect. Not ideally what I wanted to begin with, because I kind of wanted to look like an old church window, so that the paint would be kind of faded and not as shiny. But I think it came out fine. That's like the least of the problems. The other thing was just that quality of the wood did tend to warp just a little bit, and so little issues like that I was having. But this is the one where I had cut. I had not laid it out. I always lay it out first. And I was able to piece it neatly, and I did the same thing where I glued the back. Now see, this is the one, oh, by the way, I accidentally sprayed the paint the wrong side, so I had to come back and sand, that's why it's white on both sides. But I did do a little sanding so that it would adhere better. Now, it just happened to work out where I could add my other piece to that little straight edge. So it worked. I did it one way, and I didn't like it because it didn't look like it was a continuous pattern, so I switched it around so it would look more like it moved into the next egg, where the other egg looked kind of cut off the way I did it. So I had to make some, artistic decisions on that part. Yeah, so same thing, cutting at 45 where you can't see it. I know, that's the worst part about trying to film and watch videos at the same time. Sometimes you forget to look at what you're actually filming. Sorry about that, guys. I want to point out what I did here because it's very important. I took my paint and got it off my table so I wouldn't accidentally stick my brush into my paint instead of the Mod Podge. So I did decide, after doing all 3, like I said, that to cover them all in the Mod Podge completely. So every section got 2 coats, and then the whole thing got coated with Mod Podge. the hangers, I used jump rings for jewelry, and I tried first painting it. I did not like that look, so I added the liquid leaf, and it made a much nicer finish. Did have some issues with one of them popping off, so make sure you use a good quality glue. Thank you, Favi, for hosting this challenge, and be sure you check out all the other videos from the playlist in the description below. And thank you so much for watching, and please hit like and subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification button, because sometimes I make pretty good videos, and I go live on Tuesdays at 2 and Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time.